I'm Kimberly, and this is the story of how my family fell apart. It all started when I was 7 years old, and my little brother Tommy turned 5. I remember the day clearly. Mom had taken Tommy to his first real music lesson. When they came back, she was practically floating on air. "Kim, come here," she called out, her voice high with excitement. I came running down the stairs, wondering what all the fuss was about. "Your brother is a musical genius." I didn't really know what that meant, but I could tell it was important. "That's great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "The teacher says he has perfect pitch," Mom continued, her eyes shining. "Do you know how rare that is? He's going to be a star, I just know it." From that day on, it was all about Tommy. Mom quit her part-time job to focus on his career. She'd spend hours researching music competitions and TV shows for kids. Our living room turned into a mini recording studio, with a keyboard, microphone, and even a small karaoke machine. Don't get me wrong, Tommy was good. When he sang, his voice was clear and pure, like a little angel. But I couldn't help feeling left out. Mom was too wrapped up in Tommy's potential stardom, and Dad was barely around. He'd leave for work before I woke up and come home after I was in bed. On weekends, he'd tinker in the garage or watch TV, too exhausted to do much else. So, I learned to take care of myself. I'd make my own lunches, do my homework without being asked, and try not to bother anyone with my problems. It wasn't all bad, though. I had my books, my few close friends, and my grandma. Grandma was Mom's mother, but they couldn't have been more different. While Mom was all about the spotlight and fame, Grandma was down-to-earth and practical. She owned a small convenience store in town, and I started helping out there after school when I was 12. "You're a good worker, Kimberly," she'd say, smiling at me over her glasses. "Smart with money, too. That'll serve you well in life." Those words meant more to me than all the vague praise I got at home. At least someone saw me for who I was, not just as Tommy's sister. Speaking of Tommy, he was thriving under Mom's attention. By the time he was 7, he'd already won a few local singing competitions. Mom would come home, waving his trophies and certificates, her face glowing with pride. "Did you see Tommy on TV last night?" she'd ask me, not waiting for an answer. The judges said he was the most talented child they'd seen in years. I'd nod and smile, trying to be happy for my brother. But I couldn't help the twinge of jealousy when I saw how differently we were treated. Tommy had the latest toys and gadgets, while I had to save up my allowance for months to buy anything I wanted. As I entered high school, the divide between Tommy and me grew even wider. While I attended the local public school, Mom enrolled Tommy in an expensive private academy known for its music program. Every morning, she'd drop him off in our beat-up minivan, fussing over his uniform and reminding him about his after-school voice lessons. Meanwhile, I'd be halfway to school already, having caught the early bus. One day, after a particularly grueling day of classes and a shift at Grandma's store, I came home to find Mom and Tommy sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by brochures and flyers. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my backpack by the door. Mom looked up, her eyes shining with excitement. "Oh, Kim, you won't believe it. Tommy's been invited to audition for the National Youth Choir. The audition's in New York. We'll need to buy new clothes, book flights, a hotel." I couldn't help but ask, "Can we afford all that?" Mom's smile faltered for a moment. "We'll manage. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Tommy. We can't let it pass by." I nodded, knowing better than to argue. But as I headed up to my room, I couldn't help but wonder, what about my opportunities? It wasn't that I was jealous of Tommy's talent. I was proud of him, in a way. But I was tired of being an afterthought in my own family. That night, I heard Mom and Dad arguing in their bedroom. Their voices were muffled, but I could make out enough to know it was about money. "We're already in debt, Linda," Dad was saying. "We can't keep spending like this." "But this could be Tommy's big break," Mom insisted. "Don't you want him to succeed?" "Of course I do," Dad sighed. But what about Kim? We haven't put aside anything for her college fund. There was a pause, and then Mom's voice, softer now, Kim's smart. She'll get scholarships. Besides, she's always been independent. She'll figure something out. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, their words echoing in my head. She'll figure something out. That's what it always came down to, didn't it? I was expected to fend for myself while they poured everything into Tommy's future. The next day, I went to work at Grandma's store. As I was restocking shelves, Grandma called me over to the counter. "Kimberly," she said, her voice gentle. "Is everything all right? You seem distracted today." I hesitated for a moment, then the whole story came spilling out, Tommy's audition, the money problems, my fears about college. Grandma listened patiently, her face growing more concerned with each word. When I finished, she shook her head. "Listen, I've been thinking. You're a hard worker, Kimberly. How would you like to start earning a real wage here at the store? Not just pocket money, but something you could save for your future." For the first time in a long while, I felt seen and appreciated. As I hugged my grandmother, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could create my own opportunities. I didn't need to wait for someone else to invest in my future. With Grandma's help, I could start investing in myself. As the years went by, I threw myself into my studies and my work at Grandma's store. By the time I was 15, I'd managed to save up a decent amount. My goal? A laptop for school. One Friday afternoon, I decided to count my savings. I went to my closet and pulled out the pink ceramic piggy bank Grandma had given me years ago. But when I shook it, something felt off. The familiar jingle of coins was missing. My heart racing, I opened the bottom and turned it over. Nothing, not a single coin fell out. With shaking hands, I made my way downstairs. Tommy was sprawled on the couch, playing video games on a shiny new console. "Hey, Tommy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You haven't seen my piggy bank, have you? Or the money inside it?" He barely glanced up from his game. "Nope, sorry." I took a deep breath and headed to the kitchen, where Mom was preparing dinner. "Mom," I began, Did you take the money from my piggy bank?" She turned to me, her face calm. "Oh, that. Yes, I did." Tommy needed a new game console. His old one broke, and he was so upset. "I knew you had some savings, so I took it." I stood there, speechless. Tears were threatening to spill, but I refused to let them fall. When will you pay me back?" I managed to ask. Mom sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "We'll see. Times are tight right now, with all of Tommy's expenses. You understand, don't you? This is an investment in his future." I didn't understand. I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. Without another word, I turned and ran out of the house. I kept running until I reached Grandma's store, tears blurring my vision. Grandma took one look at me and flipped the open sign to closed. She led me to the back room and sat me down. "What happened, Kimberly?" she asked gently. Between sobs, I told her everything. As I spoke, I watched Grandma's face change from concern to disbelief to anger. "What am I going to do, Grandma?" I asked, feeling more lost than ever. "I can't trust them." Grandma was quiet for a moment, then she stood up. "Wait here," she said. She disappeared into the front of the store. When she came back, she was carrying a laptop box. "I was saving this for your birthday," she said, placing the box in my lap. "But I think you need it now. Just don't take this home. Keep it here at the store. Use it after your shifts or on weekends. I don't want your mother getting her hands on this too." That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. I would never let anyone take advantage of me like that again. I would work harder, save more, and find a way out of this house where I felt like a stranger. My 16th birthday rolled around with little fanfare. Mom remembered the date this time, at least. She and Dad wished me a happy birthday over breakfast, Dad sliding a card across the table before rushing off to work. I invited a few close friends. We set up some folding tables in the backyard, strung up some lights, and had a pretty good time. I'd saved up from my job at Grandma's store to buy snacks and drinks. My best friend Rachel helped me decorate with some balloons and streamers we got from the dollar store. As we sat around, eating chips and laughing about school drama, I caught myself feeling genuinely happy. For a moment, I could forget about the family dynamics and just be a normal teenager celebrating her birthday. But reality has a way of creeping back in. When Tommy's 16th birthday came around 2 years later, it was an extravaganza. They rented out the fanciest restaurant in town, invited what seemed like half the city, and even hired a professional photographer. The cherry on top? A shiny new car parked outside with a big red bow. I stood off to the side during the party, watching Tommy beam as he accepted congratulations and gifts. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to resent him. This wasn't his fault. He was just living the life our parents, especially Mom, had orchestrated for him. A few months later, I was thrilled to learn I'd been accepted to study economics at a college in the next state. Even better, I'd earned a partial scholarship. But as I soon discovered, partial was the operative word. The scholarship wouldn't cover all my expenses. With trepidation, I approached my parents one evening. "Mom, Dad," I began. "I got into State University for economics. I have a scholarship, but I'll need some help with the rest of the tuition and living expenses." Dad looked up from his newspaper, a crease between his brows. "That's great news about the scholarship, Kim. But you know money's tight right now. With Tommy's music school fees." Mom jumped in. "Kimberly, you're a smart girl. I'm sure you can figure something out. Maybe get a job? You've always been so independent." Defeated, I retreated to my room. As I sat on my bed, staring at the acceptance letter, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Grandma, asking how the conversation with my parents went. I called her back, my voice shaking as I recounted what had happened. Grandma listened quietly, then said, "Kimberly, don't you worry. We'll figure this out together." True to her word, Grandma set up a college fund for me. Between that, my scholarship, and a part-time job I picked up at a cafe near campus, I managed to make it work. "You're going to do great things, Kimberly," Grandma said. "I'm so proud of you." Those words carried me through the tough times in college. When I was up late studying, or pulling double shifts at the cafe, I'd remember Grandma's faith in me and push through. I called Tommy occasionally, trying to keep our connection alive. He was at a prestigious music college, all expenses paid by our parents, of course. Despite the differences in our situations, it was nice to hear his voice, to know that at least one person in that house might be missing me. After 4 grueling years of balancing studies, work, and tight budgets, I finally graduated with my degree in economics. Armed with my hard-earned qualifications and a determination to succeed, I returned to my hometown. It wasn't long before I landed a job at a prestigious financial firm and found a small but comfortable apartment to rent. Life settled into a pleasant routine. Work was challenging but rewarding, and in my free time I started to build a life for myself outside of my family's shadow. I made new friends, took up hiking on weekends, and even started dating a bit. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my mother standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. She stepped inside, wringing her hands. "Kimberly, I need your help." Those words sent a chill down my spine. In all my years, I couldn't remember my mother ever asking for my help. "What's wrong?" I asked, leading her to the couch. She sat down heavily, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sick, Kim, really sick. The doctors, they say I need treatment, but our insurance won't cover it all." My heart dropped. Despite everything, she was still my mother. "How much do you need?" $15,000, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know it's a lot, but I didn't know where else to turn. "Your father and we've spent everything on Tommy's education. We thought it would pay off by now, but... The next morning, we drove to the bank in silence. As we waited in line, Mom started talking, her voice low. "You know, Tommy's doing so well," she said. "He's got offers from several big music groups. Once he signs, we'll be able to pay you back in no time." I nodded, only half listening. My mind was racing, thinking about how I'd manage the loan repayments on top of my rent and other expenses. After signing what felt like a mountain of paperwork, I transferred the $15,000 to my mother's account. As we left the bank, she hugged me tightly. A few days later, I was scrolling through my social media feed during my lunch break when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was Tommy, my brother, posting selfies from the Swiss Alps. Confused, I quickly sent him a message. "Hey Tommy, aren't you supposed to be in school? What are you doing in Switzerland?" His reply came quickly, "Oh, hey Kim. Yeah, Mom surprised me with this trip. Said I was having a creative block and needed to recharge. It's amazing here. I'm staying for 2 months." I stared at my phone, my mind refusing to process what I was reading. 2 months in Switzerland? Creative block? Then it hit me. The $15,000 loan. It wasn't for medical treatment, it was for Tommy's vacation. With shaking hands, I called my mother. "Kimberly, what is it now?" Her voice was irritated, as if I was interrupting something important. I took a deep breath. "Mom, we need to talk about the loan. About Tommy's trip. How could you lie to me like that?" There was a pause, then she sighed. "Now, listen here. Your brother is a creative person. He needs constant inspiration and pampering to open up creatively. This trip was essential for his career. He's going to be famous, and we all need to support him." "Support him?" I echoed, my voice rising. "By taking out loans we can't afford? By lying to your other child?" "Oh, don't be such a miser," she scoffed. "You should be happy to support your brother." That was the last straw. "Mom, I want the money back. All of it. Now." Her laugh was cold. "Don't be ridiculous, Kimberly. The money's spent. Besides, you're doing well enough. You don't need it." "If you don't pay me back," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "I'll sue you." There was a moment of stunned silence, then she exploded. "Sue me? Your own mother? You're a terrible daughter. I can't believe I raised such a selfish, heartless child." "This is your last chance, Mom," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Pay me back, or I'm going to court." "Go ahead," she spat. "See if I care. You're dead to me, Kimberly. Dead." The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, shaking with a mix of anger and shock. I'd known this conversation wouldn't go well, but I never imagined it would end like this. In a daze, I called the one person I knew I could always count on, Grandma. I broke down, sobbing as I recounted everything that had happened. Grandma listened patiently, making soothing noises as I poured out my heart. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Grandma spoke, her voice firm. "Kimberly, listen to me. What your mother did was wrong. If you decide to go through with this, I'll support you. I know a good lawyer, my friend's son. He might be willing to take on your case for a reduced fee." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal consultations, paperwork, and sleepless nights. True to her word, Grandma covered the legal fees and introduced me to her friend's son, a sharp young lawyer named Michael. "It's an open and shut case," Michael assured me after our first meeting. "We have the bank records, the text messages. Your mother doesn't have a leg to stand on." The day of the trial arrived. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw my mother for the first time in months. She sat on the other side, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't even look at me. The proceedings seemed to pass in a blur. Michael presented our case clearly and concisely, showing the judge the evidence of my mother's deception. When it was her turn to speak, my mother spun a tale of a desperate need for a family medical emergency, but her story quickly fell apart under questioning. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge made his ruling. In the matter of Kimberly Johnson versus Linda Johnson, he began, I find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to repay the full amount of $15,000, plus interest and court costs. A few days later, I received notice that my mother had taken out a loan to repay me. The money was back in my account, but it felt hollow somehow. I'd won the case, but I'd lost my family in the process. The dust had barely settled from the court case when the real storm hit. It started with a notification on my phone. A friend had tagged me in a post. Curious, I opened it, only to feel my stomach drop. There, on my mother's social media page, was a long, heart-wrenching post about how her own daughter had cruelly taken her to court. She painted herself as a loving, sacrificial mother who had given everything for her children, only to be betrayed in her time of need. My phone buzzed constantly over the next few days as more relatives reached out, not to hear my side, but to berate me for my actions. I raised you better than this, my aunt scolded. You brought shame to this entire family, a cousin messaged. Don't bother coming to the next family reunion, an uncle warned. In the midst of this storm, there was one unwavering source of support, Grandma. She called me every day, her voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. Don't you pay any mind to those fools, she'd say firmly. They don't know the half of what's been going on in that house all these years. A week after my mother's posts went viral, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years, my father's. I'd been seeing your mother's posts, he began, and I braced myself for the criticism. But then he surprised me. I want to hear your side of the story. The full story. So I told him everything. The years of feeling overlooked, the incident with my piggy bank, the struggles through college, and finally, the loan and the betrayal that led to the lawsuit. There was a long silence when I finished. Then, to my shock, my father's voice came back thick with emotion. I had no idea, he said quietly. Kimberly, I'm so sorry. I failed you as a father. I followed your mother's lead for too long. I told myself I was providing for the family by working long hours, but the truth is, I was running away from the problems at home. I should have been there for you. Tears were streaming down my face now. This was the most open, honest conversation I'd had with my father in, well, ever. I've got a lot to make up for, he said. I know that. But if you're willing, I'd like to try. To be the father I should have been all along. As we continued to talk, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a parent in my corner. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a start. After our heart-to-heart, Dad decided to take a closer look at the family finances, something he admitted he should have done years ago. He had found that Mom had been secretly withdrawing money from their joint account for years, funneling it all into Tommy's career. But that wasn't the worst of it. She'd taken out multiple loans in both their names, all to fund Tommy's pursuits. They were drowning in debt, and Dad had been completely in the dark. The confrontation that followed was explosive. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from the neighbors. There was shouting, the sound of dishes shattering, and finally, the arrival of police cars. In the aftermath, Dad filed for divorce. The proceedings were messy, but in the end, Mom got half of everything, which went straight to paying off her mountain of debt. I maintained my distance from Mom, focusing on rebuilding my relationship with Dad and cherishing the unwavering support of Grandma. Life started to feel normal. Then, about a year after the divorce, Mom's triumphant posts started appearing on social media again. Tommy had graduated from his music college and landed a spot in a famous band. Her captions were full of I told you so's and thinly veiled jabs at Dad and me. Some people couldn't see the potential, she wrote. But a mother always knows. Who's laughing now? I tried not to let it get to me. I was doing well at work, had just made a down payment on my own apartment, and was finally feeling like I was on solid ground. Dad was doing better too, seeming happier and more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. 2 years after Tommy's big break, he took another trip to Switzerland. His social media was full of glamorous shots of the Alps, videos of him partying with his bandmates. Then, one chilly morning, he decided to film himself singing at the top of a mountain, wanting to impress his fans with his vocal range in the thin, cold air. It was a disaster. He caught a severe cold that developed into a serious throat infection. Despite the best medical care, the damage was done. Tommy lost his singing voice. The news hit Mom hard. Her neighbors later told me that they heard screaming coming from her house, sounds of things being thrown and broken. When they went to check on her, they found her in a state of total hysteria. She didn't recognize anyone, kept babbling about lost fortunes and ruined dreams. They had no choice but to call for help. Mom was admitted to a mental health facility. The doctors diagnosed her with a severe nervous breakdown, exacerbated by years of stress. As for Tommy, he spiraled into depression and turned to alcohol. For months, we weren't sure if he'd pull through. But slowly, with support from Dad and me, he started to turn things around. He got sober and, in a twist that surprised us all, applied to college to become a music teacher. "I can't sing anymore," he told me over coffee one day. "But maybe I can help other kids who love music. Do it right, you know? Without all the pressure and crazy expectations." I felt a surge of pride for my little brother. "I think that's a great idea, Tommy." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the tumultuous journey of the past few years. I thought about Mom, still in the facility, trapped in a world of her own making. About Dad, finally free to live his own life. About Tommy, finding a new path. And about myself. I'd stood my ground, fought for what was right, and come out stronger on the other side.
Hi, I'm Maria. Growing up in a cozy suburban home, I always felt overshadowed by the towering presence of my older sister, Mary. Our parents adored her, hanging on her every word, while I was just the other daughter. One fateful night, Mary's jealousy took a dark turn. I awoke to a cold draft and the sharp snip of scissors. My heart pounded as I touched my head, only to find my long, cherished hair brutally chopped and scattered across my pillow. There stood Mary, scissors in hand, a twisted smirk playing on her lips. "Mary, what have you done?" I choked out, tears filling my eyes. "Oh, come on, Maria. It's just hair. It'll grow back," she said dismissively, twirling the scissors like a prize. I couldn't comprehend her cruelty. In a daze, I rushed to our parents' room, desperate for justice. "Mom, Dad, look what Mary did," I cried, holding up the severed locks, my voice trembling. But they were groggy and irritated, hardly sympathetic. "Maria, it's the middle of the night," Dad grumbled. "This is ridiculous." "Please, Mom, you have to see what she's done to me," I begged. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. "Can't this wait till morning?" "No, it can't," I protested, the weight of betrayal crashing over me. As the argument escalated, Mary waltzed in, playing innocent. "I was just trying to help her," she said sweetly. She always complained about how long her hair was. "Help? You call this help?" I was incredulous. Our parents exchanged weary glances. "Maria, maybe she was just trying to." "To what, Mom? Ruin me?" I cut her off, feeling the sting of injustice. The room's tension thickened as I pleaded for understanding, but Dad's voice boomed with finality. "Maria, that's enough. We won't tolerate this ingratitude and disrespect." "Disrespect?" I echoed, my voice breaking. "I'm the victim here." Mom's ultimatum was ice cold. Either apologize to Mary or leave. Apologize? For being attacked in my sleep? The unfairness was suffocating. My heart shattered as I realized I was alone, even among my own family. With tears streaming down my face, I grabbed a few belongings and stepped out into the night. The door slammed behind me, echoing my devastation. Alone and betrayed, I wandered through the silent streets, my suitcase my only companion. When I reached Lena's apartment, it felt like a beacon in a storm. She opened the door, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Maria, what on earth happened?" "They kicked me out," I said, the tears spilling over. Lena ushered me inside, offering a safe harbor as I recounted the night's events. Her shock turned to outrage. "Stay here as long as you need," she said firmly, but staying wasn't enough. I needed to find my footing, so I threw myself into work, waitressing by day, cashiering in the evenings, and dog walking on weekends. The grueling hours slowly nurtured a sense of independence. Then one day, Mr. Jacobs walked into the diner. An elderly man with kind eyes, he always left generous tips. "You're such a hard worker, Maria. Ever thought of a quieter job?" he asked. "A quieter job?" I echoed. "My bookstore," he replied. "I could use someone trustworthy to help run it." His offer was a lifeline. Working at Jacobs Books felt like coming home. Surrounded by the musty scent of old books, I found solace. Mr. Jacobs believed in me in ways I never believed in myself. "You're meant for bigger things, Maria. Don't let this define you," he'd say. His words echoed as I sat across from Miss Turner, a sharp-minded legal advisor recommended by a bookstore regular. Her office was cluttered with books and legal files, a testament to her busy career. "Your parents kicking you out like that? It's not just morally wrong, it's legally questionable," Miss Turner said, poring over the notes I'd made. "So there's something I can do?" I asked, hope mixed with uncertainty. "Yes," she said, "but it'll require work, evidence, documentation, anything to support your story. It's your word against theirs. But if we can prove a pattern of behavior, we might have a case." I left her office not just with advice, but with a mission. In my small rented apartment, I began meticulously documenting everything: text messages, emails, any scrap of evidence that could illuminate the mistreatment I had endured from my family. But gathering evidence was just the beginning. I needed a plan that would bring everything into the open and force my family to confront the consequences of their actions. My nights were spent researching, my days focused on assembling information. I reached out to old friends and neighbors, carefully building my case. Each piece of evidence was like a brick in the fortress I was constructing. "Document everything. Leave no stone unturned," Miss Turner advised in our weekly meetings. So that's exactly what I did. As my plan took shape, I felt a transformation within me. I was no longer just a victim of my circumstances. I was the architect of my destiny. The girl who had been cast out was now ready to stand her ground. I was determined to bring the truth to light, no matter what it took. Months of preparation led to this moment. My plan was meticulous. Every detail had been carefully thought out. The evidence against my family was compiled, a blend of solid proof and strategic tactics. I started with Mary. She had a knack for twisting reality, especially on social media, where she curated her perfect life. I monitored her posts, knowing her image was her greatest pride. "Mary loves the spotlight," I murmured to myself. "Let's give her a show." I began a subtle campaign, posting old photos of us with cryptic captions, missing the sisterly love. People took notice. Questions were asked, and whispers began to circulate. I carefully shared stories and evidence with mutual friends, never revealing too much at once. Mary's pristine image began to crack. Simultaneously, I assembled a legal arsenal: old email exchanges, voicemails, medical records, anything that illustrated years of favoritism and neglect. Miss Turner was instrumental, guiding me through the complexities of the legal system. "The stronger your case, the harder they'll fall, Maria," she encouraged. With everything ready, I waited for the perfect moment: our extended family's annual reunion. It was the ideal stage, an audience composed of everyone who needed to hear the truth. As I walked into the gathering, I felt the tension. Mary greeted me with a forced smile, while my parents barely hid their disdain. Dinner was a haze of superficial conversation and strained politeness. Then, as everyone settled in the living room, I stood up and cleared my throat. The room grew silent. "I have something to share," I began, my voice unwavering. I recounted the hair-cutting incident, the years of neglect, the night I was thrown out. With each word, the tension in the room thickened. My parents and Mary sat frozen, their faces a cocktail of fear and anger. "Maria, what is this nonsense?" Dad spluttered. "It's not nonsense, Dad. It's the truth." I held up the evidence: photos, emails, testimonies. The reality laid bare sent the room into chaos. Disbelief and outrage erupted. "Mary, how could you?" one aunt exclaimed. "Maria, why didn't you ever say anything?" a cousin asked, aghast. Amid the uproar, I made a call. Miss Turner, I said, my voice steady. It's done. They know everything. Good, she replied. I'll take it from here. As the night unraveled, the facade of my perfect family crumbled. Legal proceedings were initiated, and my family's reputation was left in tatters. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure. The road ahead was still long, but justice was within reach. The courtroom, a stark contrast to the chaotic reunion, felt both intimidating and empowering. Everything was calm and orderly, yet charged with anticipation. I sat next to Miss Turner, composed but anxious. Miss Turner, are we ready for this? I whispered. We've been ready, Maria. Today, justice will be served, she replied, giving me a reassuring smile. As the judge called the court to order, the silence was deafening. Miss Turner began our case with a calm, confident precision, presenting the emails, the photos, the testimonies. Each piece of evidence drove a nail into the coffin of my family's lies. My parents and Mary sat next to their lawyer, their faces reflecting a mixture of anger and fear. Mary cut her hair in her sleep. Miss Turner recounted firmly, and when Maria sought support from her family, she was thrown out like a criminal. The judge listened intently, occasionally nodding as the story unfolded, gripping the courtroom. When it was my family's turn, their lawyer attempted to minimize the events, dismissing them as ordinary family disagreements. It's just sibling rivalry, he argued. Sibling rivalry? I blurted out, unable to contain myself. They left me homeless. The judge cautioned me to remain quiet, but I could see a hint of sympathy in his eyes. The proceedings dragged on, yet with every word spoken, the truth became increasingly undeniable. In the end, the judgment was swift and just. My parents and Mary were found guilty of emotional abuse and wrongful eviction. The sound of the gavel striking was like music to my ears. Outside the courtroom, I was greeted by a crowd of supporters and curious media. The story had resonated with the public, a tale of family betrayal and a battle for justice. Maria, how do you feel about the verdict? A reporter asked. Relieved, I replied, feeling the weight of years finally lifting off my shoulders. And hopeful. This isn't just my victory. It's for anyone who has ever faced family injustice. In the weeks that followed, I turned my story into a force for change. I spoke at events, joined support groups, and worked alongside Miss Turner to assist others who were grappling with similar family legal issues. My life had taken an unexpected path, but I embraced it wholeheartedly. From the depths of despair, I had emerged stronger, more determined, and empowered. I found peace not just in the justice that was served, but in the knowledge that my story could inspire and uplift others. My family faced the consequences of their actions. Their once perfect image was shattered. I didn't rejoice in their downfall, but I did feel a sense of closure. Looking forward, I knew the road wouldn't always be easy, but I was prepared for whatever lay ahead. The toxic people in my life had faced their karma, and I, Maria, have found my triumph. And now, I have a question for you. If you were in Maria's position, would you have chosen to legally confront your family, or would you have sought a different path to find closure and move on? This choice is full of emotional and moral complexities. What would you do and why? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share your opinions in the comments.
Hey, I'm Jack. I'm 17, a high school senior, and let's just say my life's a joke. My parents treat me like I'm invisible, mostly because I'm not the golden athlete my sister Mia is. She's 16, a year younger, but apparently flawless in their eyes. They act like she's some gift to the world, and I'm just here. Picture this. I'm living in our basement, which is basically a damp, musty dungeon. My mattress is lumpy, my desk is barely standing, and the lamp flickers like it's constantly on the edge of dying. Mia, on the other hand, has the nicest room upstairs, pink walls, fluffy carpet, and a chandelier. Yeah, an actual chandelier. I remember scoring the winning goal at my soccer game when I was around 9, thinking they'd finally be proud. They barely looked up from their phones. But when Mia won her first track meet, it was like a national holiday. Trophies, banners, you name it. School isn't much better. I'm barely scraping by in most subjects. Art is my escape. I can lose myself for hours sketching or painting. I showed Dad one of my drawings once, hoping maybe he'd be impressed. He just grunted, asking if I'd finished my chores. "Why don't you try out for a real sport instead of wasting time on that artsy crap?" he said. Thank God for Jake, my best friend since middle school. He gets it. He's always encouraging me to create. "Dude, your stuff is amazing. You gotta enter that art contest Miss Thompson told us about," he said last week. I just shrugged. What's the point? Any prize money would probably go to Mia's new running shoes. Dinner last night. A joke. Mom made this huge roast, Mia's favorite, of course. She turned to her, all smiles. "So, Mia, honey, how was practice today?" Mia launched into a long story about lap times and how her coach thinks she might qualify for state. Dad was beaming. I cleared my throat. "Oh, I got a B+ on my English essay." Crickets. Then Dad just said, "Pass the potatoes." I passed the bowl, my hands shaking, swallowing down this urge to scream, flipped the table, anything to make them see me. But instead, I sat there, invisible as usual. After dinner, I headed back to my basement cave, hearing them laughing upstairs, probably planning Mia's next big celebration. I pulled out my sketchbook, letting my frustration pour onto the paper. Maybe one day they'll see me. Maybe one day I'll matter. But right now, I'm just the kid in the basement, forgotten and dreaming of the day I can break free. Then the house exploded with excitement. Mia won some big track meet. Mom and Dad were practically dancing around the living room. Our little superstar. Mom gushed, hugging Mia like she'd saved the world. Dad was on the phone, telling everyone within earshot about her victory. I slipped past them toward the door. They didn't even glance my way. At school, Miss Thompson caught me after class. "Jack, have you thought about entering the Riverside art competition? The deadline's next month." I shrugged. "What's the point?" She looked at me serious. "The point is, you have real talent, Jack. This could be a big opportunity." Her words stuck in my head that night. Then, while grabbing a snack, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in the study. Mia's coach said she could go all the way to the Olympics with the right training, Dad was saying. "But it's so expensive," Mom replied. "Where would we get that kind of money?" Silence. Then Dad said, "Well, there's Jack's college fund. It's not like he's using it." I felt like I'd been punched. I burst into the room. "You can't do that. That's my money." They looked at me, shocked. "Jack, this is a private conversation," Mom said. "Private? You're talking about taking away my future." Dad stood up, towering over me. "Listen here, young man. We make the decisions in this family." "Yeah, decisions that only benefit Mia," I shot back. "Don't you dare talk about your sister that way," Dad roared, his face red. "Or what? You'll send me back to the basement." "Oh wait, you already did." Before I knew it, Dad shoved me hard. I stumbled, slamming my arm against the desk. Pain shot through my wrist. "Get out of my sight," he growled. The next day, my wrist was swollen and purple. Miss Thompson noticed right away. "Jack, what happened?" "I don't know why, but I just broke down, everything pouring out, the basement, the favoritism, the college fund, all of it." She listened, her face growing more concerned with every word. When I finished talking, Miss Thompson took a deep breath, her expression serious. "Jack, this is serious. We need to document everything." She helped me write down dates, incidents, every single detail, and even took pictures of the bruises on my ribs. "We might need this," she said quietly. "Just in case." As I left her classroom, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone was finally on my side. Over the next few weeks, I poured everything into my art project. Every sleepless night, every overlooked achievement, every bit of pain and frustration. All of it went onto that canvas. I worked in secret, hiding my progress from my parents. They wouldn't understand anyway. One afternoon, Mia stopped me on the way to the basement. "Hey, can we talk?" She looked hesitant, almost guilty. I eyed her suspiciously. "About what?" "I've been noticing how Mom and Dad treat you. It's not fair," she said, her voice soft. I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, you're noticing now? After all these years?" She looked away. "I'm sorry." "Save it, Mia. You've had plenty of chances to speak up. Enjoy your golden child status." I pushed past her, ignoring the hurt look on her face. Too little, too late. The next day, Jake came over, a backpack full of tiny cameras. He held one up. "You sure about this, man?" I nodded, determined. "Miss Thompson says we need solid evidence. It's the only way." We set up cameras around the house, one in the living room, another in the kitchen, and a hidden one in my basement room. It felt wrong, but I was desperate. Then, a few days later, disaster struck. I came home to find Mom and Dad standing in my basement, surrounded by shredded pieces of my artwork. "What is this garbage?" Dad bellowed, holding up scraps of my contest piece. "It's not garbage. It's my art." I yelled back, voice shaking. Mom shook her head. "Art won't get you anywhere, Jack. We're doing this for your own good." I watched, numb, as they destroyed months of work. Tears streamed down my face, but they didn't even notice. The next day, I told Miss Thompson what happened. Her face hardened, her eyes fierce. "This ends now," she said. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a key. "Here, it's for the art supply closet. You can work here after school. I'll make sure no one disturbs you." For the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into recreating my piece. This time, it was darker, more raw. I painted a boy trapped in a glass box, watching his family laugh and celebrate on the other side. The boy's face was a mask of pain and longing. Meanwhile, the cameras at home kept rolling. They caught everything. Every dismissive comment, every ignored plea for attention, every moment of favoritism toward Mia. Jake helped me compile the footage, and my stomach churned as I watched my life play out on screen. "Dude, this is messed up," Jake whispered, shaking his head. I nodded, my face grim. "Yeah, but now we have proof." The night before the contest deadline, I finally finished my piece. Miss Thompson gasped when she saw it. "Jack, this is incredible. It's so powerful." I stared at the canvas, at the raw expression of my truth. "You think it has a chance?" I asked quietly. Miss Thompson squeezed my shoulder. "More than a chance. This could change everything." The day of the contest arrived, and my stomach twisted with nerves. I stood by my painting as judges and visitors passed by. Some stopped, staring at it with wide eyes. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Then, over the loudspeaker, I heard, "First place goes to Jack Anderson." I couldn't believe it. Me, first place. As I accepted the award, cameras flashed, and a reporter approached me. "Can you tell us about your piece?" I took a deep breath. It's about feeling invisible in your own home. About being pushed aside and forgotten. The reporter's eyes narrowed. "Is this based on personal experience?" I nodded, my voice barely steady. Yes, it is." That's when everything exploded. My story was everywhere. Local news, social media. Headlines screamed, "Talented artist exposes family neglect." A few days later, Child Protective Services showed up at our house. A few days later, I handed over the video evidence Jake and I had collected. The CPS worker's expression grew darker with each clip. When it ended, she looked at me, her eyes full of sympathy. This is serious, Jack. You've been incredibly brave. My parents were in shock. They couldn't believe the image of their perfect family was unraveling. Mom burst into tears. How could you do this to us? She wailed. Dad was more direct. You ungrateful little. But he was cut off by the CPS worker. Sir, I suggest you remain silent. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of interviews and court dates. My parents faced charges of neglect and emotional abuse. The look on their faces when the judge announced the verdict, guilty on all counts, was something I'll never forget. The court decided I should live with my Aunt Lisa and Uncle Tom, Mom's sister and brother-in-law. They were nothing like my parents. They helped me set up a real bedroom. No basement this time. You're safe now, kiddo, Uncle Tom said, ruffling my hair. Aunt Lisa added, and we're so proud of you. Those words, I'd waited my whole life to hear them. 2 years flew by. I'm in art school now, on a full scholarship. My work's been displayed in a few galleries, and I've even sold some pieces. Life's good. As for my parents, last I heard, they were struggling. Dad lost his job when the story broke, and Mom's perfect mother reputation shattered. They tried to reach out, but I'm not interested. Mia reached out recently, too. She's in college now and even gave up track. She said she wants to reconnect, to make things right. I thought about it for a long time before replying. I'm glad you're doing well, Mia, but I'm not ready for a relationship. Maybe someday, but not now. Take care. When I hit send, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first. My art, my dreams, my happiness. That's what matters now. Looking back, that scared kid in the basement feels like a different person. I made it out. I survived. And now I'm thriving. That's the best revenge of all. So here's my question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you ever forgive Mia? She knew what was happening, but stayed silent for years. Now she wants to reconnect. Is it too late for second chances, or should family always get another shot? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.